maps, advisories, and even video.
This hurricane preparedness tip was brought to you by your community radio station, Radio Cayman 89.9 FM.
Here is where tradition never dies. This is your radio, Cayman.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. And Cayman Airways. Call them on 949-2311 to book your nonstop flights to Los Angeles and Panama. And Digicel, Cayman's bigger, better network.
Oh, I think they're doing a great job. A lot of them are.
Good afternoon, Dan. How are you?
Not too bad, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today with Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
But I do have some questions.
There are more questions than answers.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoy this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. It may not be a wet Wednesday, but it's still wonderful all the same as we invite you to be a part of the discussion and a chance to focus on education to start things off. So please join us.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255.
Courtesy of Flow.
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Ready? Let's do it. Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. And if you are surrounded by people with the energy, the enthusiasm, the education, and the interests, maybe we'll start things off today being thankful. Dr. Perlin, we sing Amazing Grace sometimes.
Of course, the amazing grace that never fails.
Never fails, you know. So love never fails, and it's a peace that passeth all understanding.
Especially in times like these when things are a little bit uphill and sometimes muffled. We need that peace, that inner peace.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, it's the disjointed, disconnected, almost sense of disunity. But I think when we think of education sometimes, we think of it academically. Maybe we think of it from the tertiary perspective, but are we failing to appreciate that early instruction from the home and the school, from the womb to the first steps to those days when our young people sort of don their cap and gown and grace the stage, and we see pride in the parents' face, but also, you know, that joy in the community.
Of course.
So it starts from that early childhood. So as we talk about maybe early trades and the golden trades and the trades that weave us, perhaps we come together. So through Dr. Perlin Henry Burrell, our manager for the early child care and education unit over at the Department of Education Services. Good afternoon. Once again, you know, it's a pleasure always to welcome you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us. So, Perlin, as you've said, and with me I have Miss Vanessa Cameron, an early childhood officer, and Miss Antoinette Cohen, who's also an early childhood officer.
2 thumbs up, she says.
Yes.
Unlike Siska Liebert, we give 2 thumbs up. For me, education isn't just equalizing, nor is it empowering. It isn't something that should be accessible and unfettered for all. I think back to what I understand as simplest and latest readings of Plato. If we have a society that champions it so that you appreciate its value, its intrinsic value, but also the value through instruction in order to be able to do something, it brings within the person a sense of confidence, self-assurance, self-worth, increases their self-esteem, but it also positions them to be more helpful. And yet we think of, you know, that 3-year-old, 2-year-old, 5-year-old sometimes, and we believe that, well, they can't do anything because they're only 3 or 4 or 5. Yet they can.
Yes, they can. And they can do a lot more than what we imagine, because those are actually called the critical years of early childhood. But as we develop more, understand more, and do more research, then we begin to understand the impact that we can have on those early years of learning and development.
In their absence, perhaps two of your colleagues, to me, Miss Reno immediately comes to mind as being an early champion, and I can still see her looking for the students in the cupboards in that classroom that was probably twice the size of this studio. And many would say, well, why do such small people need such a large space? Until you realize that even the play field isn't big enough to contain their energy. 30 years later, maybe we've come, 50 years perhaps, come to a space where we appreciate that. So that early childhood and that sort of education and instruction, maybe respectfully through you, Dr. Perlin, maybe let me ask, we talk about early childhood, we banter a lot, we throw out names and acronyms and all sorts of references, but rarely do we appreciate the import, try to give an explanation. So what does early childhood mean? What is that period of time? What is the education instruction? Why is it important?
I think it's not unique to the Caribbean or Cayman in terms of how we look at early childhood, but it has a long history of starting in the backyard, in just a little person who just wants to have something to do. And so as the research comes more and more, we are beginning to appreciate the work that can be done in the early years to ensure, as a society, as a country, and on the global stage, that early childhood continue to improve. And so as we look at even the golden threads of early childhood, it's about bringing that awareness to the public that, as you said, it's woven together. What are the key factors that we should be looking at or into as the research continues to expand in the area of early childhood education?
Well, let me pivot to two of your colleagues, Ms. Vanessa and Ms. Antoinette. Let me ask, we appreciate the importance of, let's say, the health inspector going into the restaurant, the kitchen, to make sure that the space is safe and clean and sanitary, and that the people who are there practicing proper hygiene, the food is stored, served, and the like. That should be accepted. We should also appreciate that maybe in the factory floor, as in the auto mechanic shop, that the equipment is safely stored, the lifts are positioned in such a way that minimizes, or certainly, if at all possible, avoids an accident. But sometimes in classrooms, we see chairs and tables, and we see other things, and other than the small objects that the children may slip on or swallow. Are there other things that we should look at that may go beyond that actually helps not only their safety, but in instruction?
Thank you. So on a whole, we focus on the enabling environment. So it's not just on tables and chairs and all those things, but also the interaction between adults and children as well. And what the Ministry of Education has been doing, our team has been doing, is to support the centers and to bring this awareness of the golden threads, even in the classrooms, because everything affects how the child develops. So it's all intertwined. And so that's what we do. And also a part of our role is the compliance aspect as well. Yeah. So while we educate and we support, we also ensure that the provisions, the support, the experiences that children are provided with, this is done in a caring, safe, and nurturing environment.
It's Colin, from your perspective,
Well, I'm going to start with saying that early years has its own discipline. It has a discipline of itself. Early years, primary, secondary, and tertiary. And you mentioned about the healthcare workers going in and knowing what they do, looking out for what their eyes are sharpened to the areas of their work. And it's the same thing with the early years discipline. There are so many other things, as Dr. P said earlier. It's not just about physical development that you could see with the natural eyes. We see when children are growing, when they start creeping, walking, and so on. But it's the holistic child. And there are some areas that a normal person wouldn't be able to see unless you're trained unless your eyes are tuned in and trained to see those areas. So in terms of holistic development, Ms. Cameron spoke about the enabling environment. We're also looking for how children build those positive relationships with adults. We're looking for, she said, the safety, but we're also looking for learning, the enthusiasm that children have towards learning. Those are some of the things that will tell us if a child is growing well, you know, those milestones, if they're reaching those milestones, and then we'll be able to, you know, seek guidance and support in those areas. So it's the holistic child that we're looking for. And as I said earlier, only an expert in the early years will be able to actually identify those skills.
I mean, I like the words we use, enabling an environment, supporting families, and nurturing. But sometimes maybe we don't see how crucial that is or how easy it is for us to actually not be doing that. We think we just drop the child off and that's it. Dr. P?
So I think that's where the enabling environment comes in, and even the campaign itself, that we want everyone to know that these are the expectations they look for. As Ms. Cowan mentioned, the trained eyes. So as the specialists, we know because we are the specialists, but we don't want that knowledge to be only with us as specialists. We want to ensure that the entire population is aware, that they begin. So because if persons are aware of the children's development, their milestones, then they can know, do I need to seek early intervention? What can I do? As you rightfully said, is sometimes we're impeding children's development, and we're not doing it because we want to do it, but we're ignorant of what we need to do. So the Golden Threads campaign is about having that public awareness, whether it be through those large workshops Ms. Cameron will speak more about, or what Ms. Cowan will talk about in terms of those milestones, because we want our communities to become more aware, because we can't do it alone as educators. It takes a village to raise a child.
And as you were sharing, you know, we talk about milestones, but not every child would hit the same milestone at the same time and in the same order as every other child.
Well, Ms. Cowan will speak more to milestones. I've given her a milestone to speak about. In Instagram is that these are global development. So you're saying that globally, these are the expected levels of development that a child, for example, 3-year-old should be hitting those milestones. But within those reality, we also know that children can develop more that before those milestones or after those milestones. So that is why we may have children who are developmentally delayed. Not necessarily that there are red flags or things that parents would be alarmed about, but we want parents to be aware of the global development, that you can actually match your child's progress against that without even becoming alarmed. For example, let us say we are driving down the road and we see 50 miles per hour. All right, so that means that gives me a gauge that where my driving should be. It doesn't mean that I have to utilize 50 because it said 50. I should be there. I can drive within that that established mileage. But I want to ensure that there are actually the awareness. I think with the awareness, we can do a lot more than we are doing. The families are aware and the public is aware. So that's a salient point, that not everyone will get there at the same time. Because for some children it's a sprint and for some it's a marathon. But we have to build the awareness. Once I'm aware, then I'll know. Ms. Cowan will talk about it more.
Ms. Cameron.
And I just wanted to add that the milestones are there. And yes, children do develop at their own pace. But we want to ensure that parents are families, everybody who supports children, they are aware that there are these milestones, and if the child is not on track, how far is the child behind? Because what we find is that if the child is way behind, it's harder to catch up. But there are some instances where children you just provide them with some skills, some strategies, and they get back on track. So let's be mindful that while children develop at their own pace, we want to ensure that children are not way behind and not provided with the services that they need to succeed.
Sometimes, as you know, below as above, right? What about a child who's not behind but maybe ahead? What, if anything, can we do? What do we do to accommodate that child who is hitting those milestones much earlier?
I think Ms. Cowan has the answer for that.
Okay, Ms. Cowan.
I see it coming
I was
out.
just waiting for you to tell us who's answering. But
Ms. Cowan is answering.
Well, thank you. As it relates to children who are ahead, in teaching and in education, you talk about differentiation. And in differentiating methods and techniques for children, you have those who are behind and those who are way ahead. So it's about assessment, the teacher recognizing where the children are at, and then provide the necessary partnerships to ensure that that child is moving along. However, some children are ahead academically, but in terms of some of the other prime areas, they are below. And so again, it goes back to assessment. A teacher can assess a child and academically the child is spiraling. However, social and emotional, they're not able to self-regulate, manage their own feelings, express themselves. Those self-help skills, they are not there. And so that teacher would now need to focus on developing those areas, because as the child progresses to the older grades, to other disciplines like primary, then those can become major behavioral issues if they are not addressed appropriately.
This is where I think, that environment and those formative years are so crucial, because academically is one thing, but then we know people, we say, oh, that's an old soul. That child may be, in the same age as the peers, but socially seems to be much more adept, much more advanced, not just precocious, not just, worldly, but cognizant. So that environment is crucial. Maybe when we come back, we can talk more about the campaign and share with our listeners, because, there's only one good thing about learning. You get to learn if you listen. Yes. Stay tuned. We'll talk today.
You know, as a little girl, I dreamt of traveling to faraway places and foreign lands. I tell you what though, no more dreaming. This summer, I'm going flying with Cayman Airways. How blessed are we in the Cayman Islands to have a very own national airline? Girl, you can fly to so many international destinations without the hassle of connecting flights. On top of Jamaica, Cuba, and Honduras, you got non-stop flights from Cayman to New York, Miami, Tampa, and even Denver, Los Angeles, and now Panama. Going to be a little cafe con leche and Hollywood Squares for this old gal this summer.
Make your travel dreams come true with Cayman Airways, offering non-stop flights for non-stop adventures in Panama, LA, and many more places in between. For details and to book, call 949-2311, contact a travel agent, or visit CaymanAirways.com.
How can you make a classic BLT sandwich even better? Well, by adding tuna. Wow. The land meets the sea in Subway's new sandwich, the Tuna BLT, available for a limited time. The Tuna BLT is exploding with flavor. Imagine crispy, juicy bacon strips on top of tuna, fresh lettuce, and slices of tomato, topped with your favorite sauce and choice of freshly baked bread. Enjoy the best of both worlds with the Tuna BLT from Subway. Subway, eat fresh.
Yo, big up Massive. Listen up, we got some good news for you. Digicel is bringing you the hottest deal in town. Send top up hassle-free to Jamaica with the My Digicel app. No fees for a limited time. Me people, is pure love from Digicel. Send credit from the My Digicel app, any kiosk, or go to a Digicel store and show your loved ones in Jamaica you care. They will stay connected, chat, and stream without them fees. Spread the word. This is a big deal. Tell your mother, father, uncle, auntie, brother, sister, and friend. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Send top up to Jamaica today. Digicel, the ultimate connection.
Terms and conditions apply. Visit Digicel's website or contact customer support for more info.
South Coast Bar and Grill up in Breakers, man, that is the place. For traditional Cayman cuisine, oh, you will love the taste. At South Coast Bar and Grill, we got conch and lobster and turtle stew. And every Sunday, come out with your family for the barbecue.
South Coast Bar and Grill by the seaside, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, lunch and dinner. Call us at 947-2517.
For Cayman and cuisine, the talk today is South Coast Bar and Grill.
Your dream home starts with a vision, and often inspiration is at the heart of that vision. Brand Source Home Gallery's in-house designers are here to help bring your vision to life. Whether you're remodeling or building a new home, Brand Source Home Gallery is your one-stop solution. Explore their kitchen cabinets, sinks, faucets, bath fixtures, tubs, vanities, and more. Let Brand Source's designers help and inspire you with your next project. Call 623-5000 and schedule an appointment with a design expert at Brand Source Home Gallery, Dorsey Drive, Industrial Park, serving Cayman for 50 years.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon, and as we always have a wonderful time speaking to our good friends, over the early childhood. Make sure I get it right. Education, right? Care and education. Education and care. They're always synonymous. Dr. Berlin together with Ms. Vanessa and Ms. Antoinette. Thanks very much. For those of us who've had parents, and primarily it's probably our mothers, our grandmothers, and aunts who walked us to school, read with us, encouraged some level of instruction, even if it was put us on the counter and say, come, watch me cook and tell us about it. They were teaching us. Now we have, as Dr. Perlin said, empirical evidence, a growing body of knowledge that helps to instruct and guide not just our nurturing, but our instruction. In the Cayman context, though, we want our children to not only be safe in our classrooms, but to feel a sense of, sobering reality that they can excel. They can move beyond these small shores and conquer the world stage, giving and receiving. But we start somewhere.
I think it goes back to what the ladies have said before, the enabling environment, that takes in the empowerment of the child and saying that I can do that. So they're willing to have a go. And so regardless of how challenging the task may be, they're willing to have a go because they're supported within that environment. That's social and emotional piece. And so that's why the Golden Threads looking more on academic. No, we want to look at the big picture. We want to look at the fact that children communication and language, because if their communication and language skills are developed, they can ask questions. They want to look at their cognitive, which is more than academics. Cognitive talks about the ability to reason, to give their different perspectives, to solve problems, and that's cognitive. We want to look at that also with parents for them to understand the wider community that these are broader areas than just academics. We also want to look at the children's physical development. And so more opportunities to run, to jump outdoors, because they develop those fine and large muscles for them. So we want to look at that important piece, social and emotional, especially in this climate where families are working outside of the home quite often. So that emotional input with that social and emotional piece. So looking at the whole child, as Mrs. Cowan says, not just the academic, which is just one fragment of cognitive development. So the Golden Thread is all about helping the community to be empowered to look at that. So within that, we want to talk about Ready, Set, Go. Ms. Cowan will talk about that. How do you get your child to be holistically ready for the reception program, which is coming up very soon, or other age-related grades? Or how can I be a part of a community program that's out there? And Ms. Cameron will talk a little bit more about what are some initiatives that we have under the Golden Threads. It's all about empowering the community. Not only we're empowering the community to support the children, but they can hold us accountable. Because when persons are aware of what the expectations are, they can hold us as educators more accountable.
That notion, soon and very soon. Sometimes not just the hymn that we sing, but ready, set, go shouldn't just be in your preparation for some race. When that child comes to school for the first day, the fear shouldn't just be in the parent of leaving the child. It should be the excitement. So to help us to get to that space where this is not just a rite of passage, it's not just something that we're, hopeful and excited, but it's just the beginning of greater things to come every unfolding day.
Absolutely. And first of all, let me just say that it is a collaborative effort. And it's not just the business of one person or the parents. So this transition, this readiness, it's everybody working together. Dr. P said earlier that the village method. And so we focus on those prime areas as the children get ready for reception. And unfortunately, it's not just the summer before, like now, but that process should have already started from the child is in the womb, because the gaps are created. And Ms. Cameron said earlier that the gaps get bigger depending on how long we take to actually recognize that there are gaps and so on. So what we are really, really hoping that the viewers out there, parents, if you're out there and you have children, getting ready to transition into reception, we want to make sure that you're focusing on the prime areas. And Dr. P stated those earlier, those focus areas that will get the children ready in their mind, ready in their body, and ready in their enthusiasm, being excited about learning, because that is also one of the areas, children taking ownership for their own learning, being independent, those self-help skills. Potty training is one of those topics that everybody talks about, and children being able to go to the bathroom on their own and supported, but not, doing it, the parents doing it for them. Those skills needs to be halfway there. Because reception is at the end of the foundation years, they are still growing and learning. And so the teachers will scaffold them and help them to reach those good levels of development. But in the interim, parents need to be reading to the children a lot, ensuring that they can follow two-part question, to listen attentively. So when you're speaking to your child, let them look into your eyes, let them focus on you and not playing on the video game or watching television while you're talking. Ensure that they're responding to you, ensure that they're able to self-regulate. They go into those outbursts, help them to self-regulate, manage their bodies, their little bodies, and give them lots of time for the outdoor, the physical, for self-expression. A lot of times, children just need to run and scream. Yeah. It's a part of their growth and development. It helps them to release the tension because, of course, they're in the house a lot of times, and they just want, especially the boys, they just want to get outside, feel, the earth, their toes touching the earth, those sensitive children, and also just to boom flick, we call that back in the days. It's cartwheels, flicking.
Yeah, I didn't know.
In my country, we call it boom flick.
Yeah.
Right, those things, and just have those free expressions, social and emotional development. Oh, wow. I can't stress it enough. These are fundamental areas. And if the foundation is not strong.
Yeah. I'm glad you shared that, because I think increasingly we're not appreciative of the environment that we've created. And as you were talking about the child, on the video games or being a sedentary lifestyle, with the greatest respect, I think to us as the adults, we're more so than ever.
Yes.
We may have a gym membership, but we don't use it. It's just a good gift for a birthday or Christmas. We're not outside being literally grounded. We're not putting our toes in the sand. We're not tasting the salt air. Ms. Cameron, we are just sometimes half attentive, if at all, while we think we're multitasking. We're saying to the child, hey, little Johnny, we're giving you some instruction, but, little Johnny is absent. We don't even know that he's left the scene because we're so busy, in our minds being productive. Bad examples sometimes without appreciating it.
That's certainly the case for many families, and with the demands in life, we keep going and going. But it's important, and this is why this campaign is essential, because a lot of children are missing out, but parents are also missing out, and there are some families who are struggling, and they are not sure where to go or what to do. But all is not lost.
All is not lost.
No, all is not lost. What we're seeing with this balanced approach to children's development is that let's go back to the drawing board. Let's be honest. Where are we now? If we look, for example, at the physical development, the outdoors, as Mrs. Cohen said, it's just awesome, even for mental health. Adults and children alike. And so are we using the outdoors? We have beautiful beaches. We've got the sand. We've got a few parks.
Yep.
There are so many things. We are fortunate to have the sunlight. As I listened to you speak, I was thinking about children who play in the snow.
Yeah.
Every day it's a requirement that they go out. And they go out. And we are blessed. So it's for us sometimes to think about our natural resources that we have. Think about just how beautiful the island is. Think about the support systems that we have and access those, resources that we have. Also, I am happy to say that the Ministry of Education provided the Smart Start program for children in the eastern districts who were without early childhood provisions below the age of 4. And so parents were able to take their children to the civic center, to the library, even to the reception, to have some experiences that would help them to develop. And so initiatives like these, targeted initiative like these, when we see that there's a need in the community, when we provide these experiences for families, then children and families will get the support that they need, and also it helps with their growth and development.
And as I listen to each of your contributions, I'm mindful that all of us, no matter the district, no matter what we think our jobs or titles may be, it's our children. If they are playing together, if they are accessing the resources that are being provided, then collectively, this small body of people in 50 years will be our policy makers and our adjudicators and all the like. And they had a shared ethos. Many subscribed to the notion, the mantra, a family that prays together stays together, but the family that plays as well. And in asking that, is it that we have moved away from that thing that we did long ago as families? We just got together, we fellowship, we had a meal, we played cards and dominoes and board games and all these things. But maybe are we thinking now what they're primitive? That's not what we do. We're too advanced, we're too sophisticated, we're too, whatever it is. Is it that the simpler things in life are sometimes the more significant?
I think it's a busyness. Ms. Cameron mentioned it, that we can dream about outdoors. I've dreamed about it many times and still don't go out there. So because we're so busy, honestly, I wouldn't say it is we are forgetting that part of our history and self. It's more that life has become so complex and demanding that to keep the children in the preschool itself is out there as a financial cost attached to it. So parents are out there trying to make two ends meet, and so it becomes more difficult to have that kind of sit-down relationship and that serve and return, which is integral for children's social and emotional peace. So whilst we understand that it is a need, but there's also many elements that are drawing on that family structure from time to time, that families are not getting the time to settle down with their children and do what they're supposed to do. It is a demanding world. And so whilst I said that about families and the cost, is that we also want to remind them about ECAP, that we have our ECAP that they can apply online to get a little bit of that. So that's a part of just supporting families. We also, Ms. Cameron said, did our Smart Start, but we're also happy to say that there will be the nursery in East End, and we're happy for that. So parents who have not registered need to register, because this part is just 20 spots we have out there. And so there are things that are going to bring the services to the children, so that the children can be celebrated and their families can have access to things. Because those who need us the most are not those who come to us. Those persons we have to go to the communities with our persons we collaborate with across different sectors. So go to the communities and do more community outreach programs that we can reach those families, those vulnerable families. And so there are a list of many, many topics and ideas. For example, we're having topics such as quality interactions. You talked about that. We'll be doing things like nurturing care. How do I nurture and care for my child at home? Or if more and more persons are opting to have even nannies at home, but how can nannies support the children? Ms. Cowan said it earlier, that is not about one person, it's about, and I said, the village. It takes everyone who supports young children and family to be educated. And we are bringing these services to them in different ways, whether it be on Zoom or it's through their centers or just bringing out like Smart Start. We are bringing the services.
Well, I appreciate as we go into the break, I'm mindful that the MP for East End, Mr. Isaac Rankin, has been a strong public advocate for education and facilitating, through the sponsorship of programming for the physical development, but also the academic. And as I listen, I recognize that on Grand Cayman, as Little Cayman and Cayman-Brac, across all three islands, we're bringing together these services through the Ministry of Education, through that collective village. So when we come back from the break, maybe we can ask you more about it and how do we access it? When do we start? Is there a course? What's the timeline? Those sorts of things. All right. To our listeners, after the headline news at 1, our very own Kathy Miller will join us for an interesting segment. But we're going to conclude when we return with this immediate focus on education. Stay tuned.
You know, as a little girl, I dreamt of traveling to faraway places and foreign lands. I tell you what though, no more dreaming. This summer, I going flying with Cayman Airways. How blessed are we in the Cayman Islands to have a very own national airline? Girl, you can fly to so many international destinations without the hassle of connecting flights. On top of Jamaica, Cuba, and Honduras, you got non-stop flights from Cayman to New York, Miami, Tampa, and even Denver, Los Angeles, and now Panama. Going to be a little cafe con leche and Hollywood Squares for this old gal this summer.
Make your travel dreams come true with Cayman Airways, offering non-stop flights for non-stop adventures in Panama, LA, and many more places in between. For details and to book, call 949-2311, contact a travel agent, or visit CaymanAirways.com.
When a storm is approaching, be sure to not only stock up on drinking water, but also non-drinking water. That is, water for cleaning and washing. You can store non-drinking water in clean bathtubs or large, sterile containers. Visit the Water Authority's website, www.waterauthority.ky, or follow us on social media for more hurricane preparedness tips.
Are you an entrepreneur with a groundbreaking idea? It's time to launch your startup and access the ultimate springboard to success. Introducing Launch Labs Incubator by Enterprise Cayman. Ignite your potential and get pitch ready for angel investment. Tap into the Cayman Enterprise City Network and vibrant community of like-minded innovators. During this 12-week program, access expert advisors in a collaborative co-work environment. No cost to participate thanks to CEC. All startups encouraged to apply. Visit enterprisecayman.ky for details and don't miss the August 1st deadline.
Wouldn't it have been grand if you had purchased land 30 years ago? It may not be 2020, but a perfect vision has never been more clear. Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, poised for growth with an eye on the future. Your land, your history, your future. Discover all that our sister islands have to offer.
Are you tired of waiting in long lines at the pharmacy just to fill a prescription?
If what, child, let me tell you.
Well, now you can save time and money with ValueMed's online prescription service. Visit ValueMed's new website, valrx.com, and click the Refill Subscriptions button. Fill in your information and choose your preferred pickup location. Or email your prescription refills for ValueMed Walkers Road at rx-wr@valrx.com, and for ValueMed in Boddentown, email rx-bt at valrx.com. Say goodbye to the hassle of waiting in lines and hello to the convenience of online prescriptions with ValueMed Pharmacy. Visit valrx.com to place your orders today.
Barry's Golden Jerk, the Cayman Brac sensation, ranked the #1 restaurant in Cayman Brac by TripAdvisor and home of the authentic jerk. Barry's Golden Jerk, serving large portions of the best jerk chicken and pork. Open Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday near the airport, or call 917-6713. Barry's Golden Jerk. It's simply better.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back. And, for the 5+ minutes remaining of our segment, as we talk about the Golden Threads program, the manager for the Early Childhood Care and Education, all right, over at the Ministry of Education, Dr. Henry Burrell, with two of the education officers, Ms. Antoinette Cowan and Ms. Vanessa Cameron. Ladies, thanks very much. It is, for me, as I just cast my mind back to what I thought was probably the greatest treat as a child. My sisters in particular would give me a book. Now, my brothers liked hammers and saws and nails and the like. Man, a book in a hammock under a coconut tree. That was a beautiful thing, man. I traveled many a field, explored many a journey, and I just had the comfort of, there's my daughter right now, so everything's good. That is what we're trying to create, right, Dr. P?
Of course, going back to basic, as we said before, and ensuring that families have that ground upon which they can stand in terms of the milestone we talked about, so that they are aware where their children are, but we want to look at it from a holistic point of view. How am I catering to my child in terms of their social and emotional? How am I creating those environments for physical development? How am I, even for the language? Because if we shut children down, then remember, language is learned in a social context. So the more interactions that we have with our children, not the devices, but real interactions with them, we are developing their oracy. And so as a result of that, they have that language development. They can ask rich and open-ended questions. And so we want a generation that think, because we don't want a generation anymore that creates knowledge, because knowledge is at our fingertip. What we want are persons who are critical thinkers, who are innovators, and persons who will create the next good thing. And so once we give the children those opportunities, we are saying that they will be able to develop holistically in all these key areas of learning and development, rather than having that narrow view of early childhood education, which is academics. My child can count, my child can say ABC, but Mrs. Cowan talked about it, that holistic view of the children as they get ready for any stage of their development, whether it be preschool, whether it be reception or other age-related grade. We want them to be ready, because the generation of tomorrow is here today. And so we have to make the best use of that opportunity. And as I said before, I just have to reach out again to my persons out in the eastern districts, just to know that make use of the nursery as it comes on stream for the next academic year. We have heard the cry. The ministry has responded and ensure that this facility will be up and running for our children and families, where they will have a place to extend their language and communication, a place to explore. And so 20 spots are there. 20 spots. And the good thing about it, we're having a morning session. So it's from 5:30 early in the morning, because we're catering for the working families as well, to 7 in the evening. It can't get any better than that. And so as we continue with the Golden Threads, we want to ensure that join us on some of the platforms that Ms. Cameron will talk about quickly. We're on some of the sessions that they can join, especially the upcoming one.
Yes, thank you, Dr. P. So on August 10th, we will have a Zoom meeting, meet the specialist, and the information will be out on the ministry's social media pages, various pages. And also, we're aiming to have quite a few mass media campaigns, because this is a national approach. Whether you are at risk or you are from the affluent group in the society, you can benefit from this information. And so we will have more meetings like this with you to share various aspects of developmental milestones with the public. We'll be doing some flyers, some videos. Did you know you will be seeing us all over? Basically, right?
It's a campaign,
because that's
right?
what this is, a campaign, and that's what we want to do. We want to bring the awareness to the public, and we want to invite everyone to be a part of this very important process at this time, because the children are the future, and we want to start them right so that they can end right.
And I'm hopeful that as parents that we're there physically, we support. As Ms. Antoinette comes on, I saw a friend share, I guess for want of a better word, a graduation. They call it something different as the child goes from one grade to the next, but we have a practice here where the child goes up on stage by his or herself. Their cultural sort of norm is you as the parent walk with the child. And I thought that was so amazing. Maybe something we'll revisit. It's supportive, is showing that you are a willing partner, but you're invested.
That's right.
And Ms. Cowan, I think nothing better than that, man, to be there for your child, through it all.
Absolutely. Every child is unique, and we want parents to see their, each child as unique, who's always learning and is capable of being resilient, confident, innovative. Children are gifted, they're creative, they're talented. And when we see children like that, then it really pushes us to create that environment to ensure that we're giving them the support, we're there with them through thick and thin to ensure that they transition well at each level of their growth and development.
Well, Dr. P, to you, and certainly the invitation is, as your schedule allows in your team, please come in. But final thoughts to us, and what do we, when do we?
I think for me, because we are so vested as a ministry into ensuring that children have access for education, I will have to also again talk about the ECAP assistance program that parents who need it must apply now, because there is actually a time if you don't apply, if you apply between June and July, you won't hear back until between July 15th and August 30th. And we know circumstances change from time to time, so put in your application. We await it on the other side. And until then, continue to partner with us, because we are here to serve the public and to make the lives of those we serve better. Thank you.
Communication, language skills, whether it's the cognitive, functioning, the social, the, emotional development. But I think we shouldn't, as you reference, ignore the physical development. That young child who is able to use the monkey bars and not just having fun, is navigating dexterity and agility for the mind and the body. Ladies, thank you so much for being such champions. All right, after the news break, join us. You've seen her last week on a number of occasions. She comes back with us. You know what she's going to tell us? Stay tuned for Talk Today.
Radio Cayman,
the voice,
the heart, the soul of the Cayman Islands.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman. Your voice, your choice. Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
The headline news is brought to you by Health Services Authority.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. Crestbridge Corporate Holdings Limited has announced that it has entered into a transaction that will see its Cayman Islands operations spun out and rebranded as a new independent business. The rebrand is anticipated to be completed by the end of September, pending standard regulatory approvals. In international news, many young people in Italy are expressing outrage on social media after a judge cleared a school caretaker of groping a teenager because it did not last long enough. The case involves a 17-year-old student at a Rome high school. She described walking up a staircase to class with a friend when she felt her trousers fall down, a hand touching her buttocks, and grabbing her underwear. After the incident, which happened in April 2022, the student reported the 66-year-old caretaker to police. He admitted to groping the student without consent, but said it was a joke. A Rome public prosecutor asked for a 3.5-year prison sentence, but this week the caretaker was acquitted of sexual assault charges. According to the judges, what happened does not constitute a crime because it lasted less than 10 seconds. Leslie Van Houten, a former follower of notorious cult leader Charles Manson, has been released on parole after serving more than 5 decades of a life sentence for 2 brutal murders. 73-year-old Van Houten was a 19-year-old member of the Manson family when she took part in the murder of a Los Angeles grocer and his wife in 1969. 5 previous bids for her parole were blocked by California's governors. That decision was later reversed by a state appeals court. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
For the latest in news and information,
Follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
The headline news are brought to you by Health Services Authority.
The Health Services Authority has over 120 world-class physicians offering the most comprehensive range of specialist services on island. Our dedicated team of professionals provide the highest quality care in orthopedics, interventional radiology, women's health, geriatrics, and a host of other specialist areas. We are a JCI accredited organization with a proven record of excellence. At HSA, we are committed to caring for you. For more information, visit hsa.ky.
Radio Cayman is pleased to feature this special Sister Islands historical vignette brought to you by the Ministry of District Administration and Lands. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your Sister Islands.
Urban Adolphus Tibbetts Certificate of Honor, 1914 to 1991. Urban Tibbetts was the 12th and last child of William and Henrietta Tibbetts of Cayman Brac. As a young man, he went to sea for a few years. When he returned home, he served as a police officer for 3 years and then returned to sea. After retiring from sea for the second time, he joined the Public Works Department and within a few years became supervisor. During his years as work supervisor, he supervised the construction of Cayman Brac Airport, the road to the lighthouse on the bluff, and the road on the south side of the Brac. He did not just supervise the work, but worked along with the men on the job. Urban raised cattle, and when he butchered at Christmas time, he often gave away beef to families who could not pay for it. He was always willing to help those in need. In the early 1950s, he donated the land for Fellowship Baptist Church, and once it was built, he joined the church and became a deacon. Urban was married to Vida McLaughlin, and the couple had 7 children.
Radio Cayman is pleased to feature this special Sister Islands historical vignette brought to you by the Ministry of District Administration and Lands. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your Sister Islands.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, and for the remainder of the show, about 85 minutes and 42.867 seconds. We have the excellent company of having our very own Kathy Miller facilitate so able as she's done so many times. So good afternoon, Kathy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
But the smile on my face, the gleam in my eye,
Oh,
the
wow.
pep in my step, I'm ready to fly.
Your face is turning a little bit more red as well. So those who are on YouTube can maybe
There you
catch a
go.
little glimpse of that. Make sure you zoom in into that face there, Paul.
There you go, man. There you go. Well, thank you very much. Not just for the chance to have the public say thanks for you, Ray, and when you host an OC but for today as well, for discussions to help us to, be more appreciative, better informed.
Yes.
So thank you.
Definitely, no problem. Well, this afternoon on this segment of Talk Today, we're going to be talking about the historic ruling made last week by the Grand Court in reference to Katina Anglin, plaintiff, versus the governor of the Cayman Islands. The governor at that time being His Excellency Mr. Martin Roper. Ms. Anglin was challenging the implementation of the Civil Partnerships Act 2020, questioning whether the governor at that time was within his powers to enable the legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So because this case was connected to other cases, and this was a really big deal here in Cayman, and that, like I said, it's a pretty historic ruling. So I did reach out to Dr. Raznovich, who is in studio with us this afternoon, and also Billy Bryan of Colors Caribbean, to get a response from them. But Dr. Raznovich was out of town, so he said the soonest I could do this interview with you, Kathy, is Wednesday. So while I was hosting last week, he was able to come in this week, and I knew that it was a topic I wanted to discuss. So I say thank you for allowing me to come on and have this discussion. So good afternoon, Dr. Raznovich, and welcome to Talk Today. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me.
It's excellent for you to be here, so thank you for joining us. So you clearly know what we're talking about today, right? And so thank you for making yourself available. And for all our listening audience out there as well, who, whether you heard about it or you didn't hear about the ruling, just to give you an update, the Grand Court of the Cayman Islands has...
The Court of Appeal, sorry.
Oh, Court of Appeal.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. See, this is why... The Court of Appeal, as Dr. Raznovich just corrected me, said the Grand Court of the Cayman... Well, it says the Grand Court. That's what the judgment said. Anyway, has rejected a constitutional challenge to the Civil Partnership Act 2020. The governor of the Cayman Islands, in enacting and assenting to the Civil Partnership Act, had acted within the scope of his reserved powers under Section 81 of the Cayman Islands Constitution. So that was the ruling that was made last week. Now, for those who might not know, just to give a real simple definition of what a civil partnership is, on the General Registry site, it does say that the difference between a marriage and a civil partnership is that marriages are religious and civil partnerships are not. However, I'm going to give a little bit more of a definition here. A civil partnership is a legal relationship which can be registered by two people who aren't related to each other. They're available to both same-sex couples and opposite-sex couples. Registering a civil partnership will give your relationship legal recognition. So now that we know pretty much what a civil partnership is, let's get into the meat of the conversation here today. So, Dr. Raznovich, I might call you Dr. Raz, whether you gave me the okay to or not.
Call me Leo.
All right, I'm going to go with Leo. All right, Leo. As simple as possible, could you explain the background story for this case?
Well, as I was saying in the background, the Court of Appeal last week, or 2 weeks ago by now, confirmed, no, it was last week actually.
It was last week.
Yeah, it was Tuesday last week. Confirmed a decision of the Grand Court.
Yes.
And hence the
wording.
The issue there. Confirmed the decision of the Grand Court, by which a challenge to the constitutional powers of the governor to act as a legislator was questioned.
Right.
And the issue of the case was defined very simply for the audience to understand, was whether there's no doubt the governor has powers to legislate in certain areas, which are 5, and they are described in Section 55 of the Constitution. The question was whether within one of those areas that the governor felt compelled to do it, which is external relations, that should actually include compliance with international treaties.
Right.
Katina lawyers submitted to the Grand Court and to the Appeal Court that external relations simply means to have tea with foreign dignitaries, to sign a treaty on behalf of the Cayman Islands, but when it comes to its domestication, that is the adoption of those texts into domestic law, it is a matter reserved for the local parliament. That was, in a nutshell, what was at stake. And both the Grand Court first and the Court of Appeal confirmed now, both they said, now, your submission makes no sense because there's no, first, external relations is it's a term of the art term, and it's open to a very broad meaning, which would include the compliance with international obligations. But then, this is I think what is important here, and with this I finish, is that if we take your point to the extreme, it means that the governor will be powerless to enforce the obligations to which he or she, as a governor, sign or contract on behalf of the Cayman Islands. And that is something that clearly is illogical under the Constitution of the Cayman Islands.
Okay, and I understand when the 2009 Constitution was written that the UK ensured that it would have certain powers, the governor would have certain powers, right?
That is correct. And one of those powers, there were 2 mechanisms, or 3 mechanisms in the Constitution of 2009. Mm-hmm. One is the most general power of the Crown to legislate for the peace and good governance of the jurisdiction. The other one is Section 81, the power of the governor in certain areas to legislate. And the third, which was repealed by the constitutional amendment of 2020, if I'm correct, with a year, was the disallowance. So that was the Secretary of State in London had the power to repeal legislation passed by the local parliament, assented by the governor, so that became law in the jurisdiction, but in retrospect, then there was a change of heart, and they believed that there was a reason why it has to be repealed. That which was called disallowance, which is in most of the constitutions, was repealed. There was I think you asked me about the history of this, and I think it's important to remember that the previous government, Alden, managed to persuade the UK government not just to repeal the disallowance clause, but also the reserved powers of the governor to legislate. And it was Colors Caribbean intervention directly in London that stopped that constitutional reform from happening. And our concern back and there was that if there could be a situation where the judiciary, the Privy Council, determined that certain legislation is required in international law, and there will be no local remedy to address that problem if the parliament decide to go against that. Mm-hmm. And some people in London were laughing, saying, well, that would never happen. Other people realized that there was a serious problem there. And this problem with the Civil Partnership Act, or bill as it was then, that the parliament here reject, was, as the Court of Appeal does say in the judgment, the paradigm of the example why Section 81 was, on the first place, enacted, and why it was defended by Colors Caribbean and prevent its repeal in 2020.
Okay, well, you gave me some extra information that I didn't know that
I
either.
know.
So when you said history.
I mean, in fairness, we actually lobbied with Stonewall in the UK. It wasn't Coros Caribbean that acted. It was Stonewall. We actually spoke to Stonewall in the UK, explained that we were at the verge of being left without any local remedy, which is a breach of the European Convention. That is the main issue here.
Right.
Article 13 of the European Convention requires effective domestic remedy. And if you're left in a position where you have none, then you are in breach of the European Convention, which has been extended to the jurisdiction.
Which is why the governor enacted the civil partnership.
Which is why the governor, when the parliament refused, had no choice but to do what he did, which is to use his reserve powers, which that's why they were there. He had no choice. You know that he could have, it was discretionary of him. He had no choice because he would have left, there was a constitutional crisis. What Parliament did in July 2020 was almost similar to a coup d'etat against the judiciary in this case. Basically give the judiciary the finger, say, no, we're not going to do this.
But if I might, just for clarity, with our understanding of the Constitution, going to the initial discussions about our Constitution, quite dissimilar to the US's Constitution as an example, where their judiciary can write law, can tell its legislature what to do. Ours specifically excludes that, right? So is it fair to say there was a coup d'etat or that they gave the judiciary a finger?
I think the Court of Appeal, this is a very important aspect of the decision of the Court of Appeal, made clear that point. The local parliament is not supreme as the United Kingdom Parliament is.
No.
And so the local parliament has no power, has no constitutional power to determine that a remedy required by judicial declaration should not be granted. The power of that, what the Court of Appeal clearly stated in the judgment, is that the parliament has the power to determine what the remedy would be, but it doesn't have the power not to comply with the decision of the court.
Right. So should we then, and I say this with a desire to understand, but also with a great sense of respect for the three sort of branches of government, in particular the legislative and the judiciary in particular. We call it a parliament, but it isn't. I mean, it's just a local body, an assembly.
I would disagree. I think it's a parliament. I think it did not behave as such in this matter. I think there are perhaps MPs who misunderstand what the role of parliament is.
Right.
The role of parliament is determined in the Constitution. I mean, this is when. It's interesting to reread the debate, the answer of the debate, or to listen if you can. Some MPs say, "Well, we have to do what the people want us to do." But this is a representative democracy. You're representing people. You're elected. You have, of course, accountability towards your voters. But your guiding is the Constitution. So when the judiciary says the Constitution requires X, B, or C, your power is not to say, well, we don't care what the Constitution requires, we're not going to do it. Your power is to choose between X, B, and C.
Yeah.
And this is where they fail. They fail in that the Court of Appeal said, in Chantal Zambiki's case, same-sex couples are entitled to a legal framework equivalent to marriage, or functional equivalent to marriage. Parliament legislate, and if it doesn't, then the UK had to step in.
Right.
This is in the judgment of the Court of Appeal in Chantal Zambiki's case.
Right.
And this is exactly what happened. The Parliament felt that they didn't want to comply by one vote, but that's enough. And I feel sorry. I mean, Alden's speech that night, I could understand his speech, at least my taking of his speech. Maybe that he meant something else. But my taking of his speech was not, he was deeply sorry by the failure of the Parliament to do what it had to do. In a system that believes in the rule of law, the branches of government, the executive and the legislature, normally bows to the judiciary when the judiciary speaks. So he felt that we were going a step backwards in our jurisdiction being a paradigm in the region of complying with the rule of law. But also I felt that he was very angry at his effort to persuade the United Kingdom to repeal Section 81, that the Cayman has achieved a maturity an understanding of the rule of law that, we are ready for not to have this type of control. And I feel that he was very, 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 I would say angry, but that's not the right word, but I could feel in his word that he realized he put so much effort on something, and this was, I think he uses these words, this is going to set us back a long time. I think he used something around those terms, if I remember correctly.
But as the Sir Alden being the architect of our present constitution, right, and driving that, and again, not to belabor it, not to get into semantics, but our legislature not being supreme and having the provisions, whether it's under Section 55 or Section 81 of our Constitution, and having the UK as the ultimate arbiter through its Parliament to decide through its appointee what should and should not be law in our land. Is it then that to call it a Parliament, to use words like Cabinet and Chief Justice and other words that are synonymous with independent nations, if Cayman was independent, it wouldn't be in this position if its Parliament, being supreme, makes a decision, unlike use the U.S. as an example, where its Supreme Court can say, listen, we don't care what you elected fellows say, this is what we as the ultimate arbiters have decided, so therefore the laws change. Our Constitution specifically, provides that the courts cannot dictate nor determine what our quote-unquote Parliament should do, but the UK can for us. Is that not the...
No, that's not the case, I'm afraid. The Constitution does not determine that the Parliament is supreme in relation to the judiciary or the executive. The three branches of governments operate on a check and balances basis. That's the underlying principle of all constitution for all overseas territories. What is peculiar in the case of the Cayman Islands is that the first part of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, has been extracted from the statutory provision from 1865 that places the Constitution above local legislation. So you have the Colonial Law Validity Act, 1865, whose sections, of which Section 3 determined that any local law passed contrary to an order in council, the Constitution being an order in council, is void and inoperative.
Okay.
That is the starting point. So the Constitution has 9 parts. 8 out of those 9 parts falls within that. So anything that is done contrary to parts 2 to 8 is void and inoperative. Part 1, the Bill of Rights, has been, and this is what is peculiar about the Cayman Islands, has been taken out of that provision. And if you read carefully, the Bill of Rights says that no law declared incompatible by the judiciary will be deemed to be void and inoperative. But the remedy to redress that is going to be provided by Parliament.
If it chooses to do so.
Yes, that is an interesting point. No, Parliament has what Parliament doesn't have is the discretion. Under the Constitution, there is no discretion. This is what the Court of Appeal has clarified in the judgment as well. There is no discretion in Parliament to not to grant a remedy. The discretion that Parliament has is to determine what the remedy would be. That is an important discretion, an important difference. But there's no discretion, and that is putting the Cayman Islands, and this is what I will politely differ from your point, is that it is very unusual to have a part of the Constitution to be inferior to the rest. It is a very peculiar position in which that the Cayman Islands managed to agree with the United Kingdom government. It's the only example in this continent. There's no example in the American continent from Canada to Argentina where you will have, particularly the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution, to be on an inferior position with regard to the rest of the Constitution. Right. There's nothing like that. And when you look at the overseas territories, the remaining 13 overseas territories of the United Kingdom, none of them have that. So this is a very, I would say it's a very important position to be. It requires a lot of responsibility, and it requires a behavior that clearly the parliamentarians back in 2020 did not show, and hence why the governor has to step in, because that's why Section 81 was put there.
If the governor did not enact the Civil Partnerships Act, okay, if that he did not implement that, what consequences would Cayman be facing?
Well, he didn't have that choice because, as I explained, there was like a coup d'etat. So there was the whole rule of law has been put upside down. You cannot have a system, as I said, nowhere in the jurisdiction in this continent you have an example where that is possible. And what was happening here is a situation where there was a breach of the local constitution, but more importantly for the United Kingdom, there were a breach of the United Kingdom's international obligations.
Right.
So the United Kingdom had to act. And as the Court of Appeal said in the judgment, it could choose by ordering council or instruct the governor to do it. And it did instruct the governor to do it, which I would agree with the governor's view at that point, that it was the most, the best way to do it, right. in that at least gives the local population the opportunity to, there was a discussion open, the legislation was published, you can now come and tell me what you think about this, what should I do, what shouldn't I do, something needs to be done.
Right. I think, Dr. Ratner, I think we all accept that the Constitution, especially on the Section 81, provides for the governor's reserve powers. I think Sir Alden's endeavors as a statesman he's aspired to be to try to bring us forward as a maturing democracy. But as I understand what you just shared, I think that runs counter to Sir Geoffrey Jowell's public pronouncements in their formulation of our Constitution when he was talking about the ability of what is now what we term our Parliament and its abilities to do subject to what the UK would allow, whether it's under their domestic legislation that we want here or whether it's the international conventions that they've extended. So I think that runs counter to maybe where our differences lie.
But I mean, this I guess one of the important aspects of the Court of Appeal decision last week is precisely to clarify that the Cayman Islands Parliament is not supreme as the United Kingdom Parliament is.
No, not at all.
The Constitution is supreme in this jurisdiction.
Right.
And all the branches of the government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary has to act in compliance with the constitutional text. This is a fundamental clarification that was done, regardless of what the intention was back in 2007, 2008 during the discussions, and what Sir Geoffrey Jowell may have said. What I say is that the Court of Appeal, by reading the constitutional text, is clear. There is an important difference, and I reiterate, it is important to understand that the Bill of Rights has been extricated from the rest of the Constitution. It's an inferior position because breaches of the Bill of Rights do not make the law invalid. Breaches of Section 81, 55, you name it, makes the law. A declaration by the court that the law is in breach of one of those sections of the Constitution makes the law void and inoperative. Yeah. There is no way around that. But with the Bill of Rights, that's not the case. The court has been stripped of the power to declare the law void and inoperative, and only can declare incompatibility, which has no effect in the enforceability of the law.
Right.
But the remedy, so the remedy to address that incompatibility is at the discretion of Parliament, the type of remedy. What it is not at the discretion of Parliament is the possibility of doing nothing. Yeah. Because you cannot have legislation in any country in the world. I mean, this is what actually is important to understand. The only country where you could have this type of situation is the United Kingdom, because they don't have a written text, they don't have a constitutional written. So you can't say this primary legislation passed by the UK Parliament is contrary to Section 53 of the UK Constitution, because they don't have a constitutional text.
But respectfully, even there, where they operate under conventions, this habitual practice over, decades and centuries become accepted even in this unwritten form. So in the Cayman context, I go back to the notion that our legislature is akin to a borough council, whereas, it's not being supreme. And if the UK says, hey, this is what we need done in this territory, we instructed our administrator, using the administrative document that we call a constitution, this one needs to happen, this is how it's going to happen, and you little boys sit down and shut up because this is it. That's what it comes to. I mean, in the simplest, most vile form, we're subject to their dictate.
But as a dependent.
As a dependent territory.
But as an independent nation, if you look around, I mean, if you look at the Caribbean context, let's look at Barbados recently.
Right.
The High Court declared void and inoperative the sodomy laws.
Right.
Because they're contrary to the Constitution. there's nothing that the parliament can do there. No. Regardless of the parliamentarian perhaps having a 99%. The only thing they can do is change the constitution, which is what Jamaica did in this point. Guyana, again, the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is the apex for them in the Caribbean, declared the Loitering Act from 1800s void and inoperative to the extent that it criminalized transgender people.
Right.
So, and again, there's nothing that Guyana can do, the Parliament Guyana can do about that. So, when the Supreme Court of the United States declared acts passed by the U.S. Parliament void and inoperative for unconstitutionality, there's nothing the U.S. Parliament can do either. So, what is strange in the Cayman Islands, and it's a great negotiation achievement back in 2007, is that the Bill of Rights has been extricated. It's an inferior step with regard to the rest of the Constitution. Right. But that, in my view, implies a lot of responsibility because the jurisdiction, and I remember when it was the anniversary of the Magna Carta, the Attorney General gave a very important speech in which he was very proud, saying that every time the court has declared incompatibility legislation, Parliament has run within months to address those issues. He was very proud of that, and rightly so, because it shows maturity in a system that believes in the rule of law. When the court makes a decision, an interpretation, you may disagree, you may highlight flaws in the decision. If you can, you may appeal, but at the end, when the whole judiciary have spoken, then that is the construction there is, and there's no more room to jiggle around that.
But sorry, Ms. Cathy.
We gotta go to a commercial break.
Yeah. As we go into the break, maybe perhaps we come back. But the difference between all those countries and Cayman, they're independent. And in the U.S. example, their constitution specifically provides that the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter over its parliament, as they call it. Significantly different from the Cayman context.
Yeah, but here the Constitution nowhere says the Parliament is the ultimate arbiter.
No, but we don't even have a Parliament. I mean, that's the
argument. With that, I think we have a Parliament. I think the Parliament has a lot of powers here. It's just a question of being in a position to understand the limits of how to use properly, under the concept of rule of law, those powers.
All right.
Because, I think you want to cut off.
We got to go to commercial break.
Yeah,
I know what you're saying, Dwayne, but at the same time, we can't model our Constitution or compare our Constitution to what the U.S. is. That's the U.S.
No,
but it seems like you are trying to use that as an example, and we can't, because what the U.S. is allowed to do, that's not what we're...
No, sorry. No,
that's what it seems to me.
No, sorry. What I'm saying is that the U.S. is very clear in what its Constitution allows its courts to do.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S., Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, all independent nations, they can choose to abide by international law and have it extended. We don't have that. We're a dependency. And our body of individuals who act honorable, noble, who try to be responsive to the electorate and what they think, making, my understanding, laws be reflective of the populace, can only do so much that is allowed for on this legislation, subject to what the UK will allow. It's like your parents saying, you can go tonight, but be home at 10. If not, the door is locked. All right? And
what I will say only to that point is that the UK, and I have a lot of points of disagreement with the UK policies, but what I will say on this point is that the UK has always been careful in only stepping in when there has been breaches of international obligations for the
United Kingdom. Yeah.
And when you look at the rest of the continent, one way or another, international law compels the local parliaments in independent nations
to comply.
Yeah. So again, even from that perspective, the only thing that is happening here is that the United Kingdom is playing the role of the international monitoring system. In Peru is an example now. They are reluctant to comply with the decision of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights that the convention requires same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
There's couples that are now heading towards the Inter-American Court. Eventually, they will have to comply. They have no choice. They have a choice.
They do.
The choice is to denounce the convention, but that makes them a pariah in the system. But that is always a choice.
That's their choice because it's an independent nation.
That is their choice. That absolutely is a choice. But it has consequences. This is the important thing that we don't live in an isolated world anymore. What happened in Germany
Wait, I
back in the 1930s.
I got to ask you to hold your thought. Because you went from Peru to Germany. We're going to go around the world before we're going to go to commercial break. So we got to go to a commercial break.
Thanks to Kathy for facilitating. So bring us back.
We'll be back.
You know, as a little girl, I dreamt of traveling to faraway places and foreign lands. I tell you what, though, no more dreaming. This summer, I'm going flying with Cayman Airways. How blessed are we in the Cayman Islands to have a very own national airline? Girl, you can fly to so many international destinations without the hassle of connecting flights. On top of Jamaica, Cuba, and Honduras, you got non-stop flights from Cayman to New York, Miami, Tampa, and even Denver, Los Angeles, and now Panama. Going to be a little cafe con leche and Hollywood Squares for this old gal this summer.
Make your travel dreams come true with Cayman Airways, offering non-stop flights for non-stop adventures in Panama, LA, and many more places in between. For details and to book, call 949-2311, contact a travel agent, or visit CaymanAirways.com.
Hey, is your phone slow, overheating, and dropping important calls? Don't fret. This summer, it's time to flip out with Digicel. Introducing the all-new Samsung Flip 4 with its sleek design and cutting-edge features. You'll flip into the summer in style and confidence. This summer, you can grab the all-new Samsung Flip 4, all just for $145. Flip into the summer with Digicel. Visit a Digicel store near you and grab the all-new Samsung Flip 4 and the amazing 7-day Prime Ultra plan today.
South Coast Bar and Grill up in Breakers, man, that is the place for traditional Cayman cuisine. Oh, you will love the taste. At South Coast Bar and Grill, we got conch and lobster and turtle stew. And every Sunday, come out with your family for the barbecue.
South Coast Bar and Grill by the seaside, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, lunch and dinner. Call us at 947-2517.
For Cayman and cuisine, the talk today is South Coast Bar and Grill.
Explore your history. Explore your land. Explore your sister islands, the ultimate staycation experience. Your culture, your freedom, the land that time forgot isn't gone. It's your sister islands.
Discover all that our sister islands have to offer.
I love Pizza Boat. It's yummy. It has my two favorite things combined, cheese and boats. Pizza Boat makes pizza way more fun.
Hop on board the Pizza Boat Express. Kids, now Pizza Boat makes pizza even more fun. Summer is here. Lunch or dinner, let Pizza Boat bring the fun. Pizza Boat, a Cayman twist to pizza, bringing fusion ingredients from all over the globe to give you locally inspired fresh pizzas all day, every day. Pizza Boat, now open in Queens Court on West Bay Road. Pick up or delivery 949-0000 or order online www.pizzaboat.ky.
She hear clunk and her car stop. I was just about to send her some money, so I send it straight to her JN money transfer card. It cost me less, and perhaps she use the card, pay the garage right away. She'll get discount through the JN Rewards program in Jamaica. This card make things easy. You can even get funds at any Multilink ATM.
JN Money Transfer Card. Fast, affordable, convenient. Tell your loved ones in Jamaica about it. Sign up is free.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon, welcome back, and thanks for joining us. And it's not intended to be an academic, non esoteric discussion, but I'm honored to be able to be included. Catherine Miller, with her intellect brings Dr. Razovich. You know, there's nothing. Maybe the only thing missing is some chocolate and some red wine to have this discussion continue.
I would say coffee for me.
Nah,
definitely coffee for me. Thank you. So I appreciate the direction you guys are going in, but I really want to bring it to the direction of this case more so. What are the kind of the implications for Cayman? What does this really mean going forward? What are our next steps and that kind of stuff? So I'd like to, take the reins again in that sense.
Madam Speaker, the chair yields its position to the honourable member.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right, Leo. So thank you for giving us the background and then, some extra information there between the two of you, as we were just discussing.
Yeah.
I want to know how Colors Caribbean was involved in this case, because you're mentioned as interveners.
Yeah.
Right? So I had to go look at what's an intervener. So explain a little bit of what that is, how you guys were involved.
But that is a procedural... it's an intervention in a procedural capacity in any system, in any procedure in general.
Mm-hmm.
There is the opportunity for third parties who has an interest in the case or the outcome of the case to intervene and be able to make submissions to the court. And so we applied to the Grand Court. There was a hearing. Katina Zanglin's lawyers were at the beginning they were in acceptance of our application to intervene, but then they opposed it. But the Grand Court made the decision that we did actually have an interest in the outcome of the case. We are an organization that works and represent LGBTQI plus people in the jurisdiction, and so the court allows to step in and intervene and make submissions through our lawyers. So that's the reason why we become an intervener. We were able to we were not in the intervener doesn't reiterate or repeat what the parties say.
Mm-hmm.
The defendant in this case was or respondent on the appeal was the governor.
Was the governor? Yeah.
Was his team. We did have one of the things that actually led Colors Caribbean to intervene was because you remember this started with a very rather left foot. I mean, it started with the decision of the Court of Appeal to grant permission not being published for almost 2 months. And it was only after the press really start, putting pressure, pushing in the court system, that one of the clerks said, I've received instruction from the judge that this must remain secret. And so it was red alarm from our perspective when we found out about this. And then our first reaction was, well, what the bloody hell is this? I mean, what is this case about first? There's no case here. And the second point is, how on earth the court considered that, one individual has a standing to challenge this legislation? What is the harm made to her? Which is the very basic principle of judicial review. You need to show what is the harm being made by the action of the government. And in a meeting with the governor, Colors Caribbean asked the governor at the time, Martin Robert, you need to instruct your lawyers to challenge the standing of the applicant here. And basically he never acted upon that, or if he did, his lawyers may have said, no, we're not going to do that. We don't know that what happened there, but the fact is this is exactly what the Court of Appeal said in the judgment. They is surprised that the governor was not invited permission to go ahead with the judicial review, to make submissions on a case which was, bound to fail from the very beginning, and also on the standing point. So everything we have said publicly or in private meetings with the governor, we were very pleased that the Court of Appeal actually said that without even our lawyers making submission. That is actually the conclusion of the judges.
I read that.
After hearing all the parties, and we did not make submissions as regards to standing because, of course, it will be extemporaneous at this point. And the only point that we made in the hearing was that this matter was academic, which the court did actually endorse. This matter is academic. I mean, it was bound to fail from the very beginning, and we're surprised that we are here. That's, giving or taking out the words of the Court of Appeal. So, that is the importance of the intervener in this case. Was we were concerned as to the way in which the governor's lawyers were going to defend this matter, and so we showed we explained our concerns to the Grand Court. We promised the Grand Court that we were not going to repeat any argument made by the governor. They allow us. We made alternative arguments, made alternative submissions, and when you read the Court of Appeal decision, you realize how much the Court of Appeal rely on our lawyer submission, which shows the importance of our intervention in that case.
It was also mentioned that there was just under 100
couples, same-sex couples, that were very negatively affected during this court proceedings that were happening over the past couple of years, really. How were they affected? Was it they weren't allowed to register apply to register as civil service partnerships?
Yeah, I mean the law was there are 93
civil
people.
Partnerships.
Close enough.
There are 93 people, 93 couple, 186 people, 93 couples back in March. So probably we are now above 100. I would have thought, but yeah, 93 couple back in March that have done the civil partnership. So their life was placed in a limbo. I mean, this is a point that during the hearing, one of the appeal judges was asked a question after our lawyer made a submission that there are 93 couples that are actually waiting on the outcome. 3 years later, they don't know where they stand.
But if the act is already, it's already there, right? And so everything that's in court was an appeal to that act that's already there. So wouldn't you be able to still have those rights that are enabled to you under that Civil Partnership Act?
This goes back to the discussion we had at the beginning. The challenge here was that the governor act contrary to Section 55/81 of the Constitution. It means that if the court had found that the governor did so, the Civil Partnership Act and all the legislation would have been, for what I explained before, void and inoperative. I mean, it didn't really matter whether it was Parliament or the governor who passed the legislation. That's the effect of the Colonial Laws Validity Act, for which the Bill of Rights have been extricated. So this is where you see the importance of understanding how the Constitution works in the context of imperial legislation that is still at the apex of the legal system in the Cayman Islands, in Bermuda, in
all
BPI, all British overseas territory.
Before Kathy continues, I know we have a caller, but listen to me, just for clarity, in the Cayman context, given the provisions within sections 81 and 55, if I have those correct, is it then that the governor, the office of the governor, I use the word supreme, you can substitute, there's a better word, say above the law, is it that we have all these things and there's our parliament, I find that hard to use, but then we have the governor's office, the governor. Is it that they're equal, they rank pari passu, or is it the governor in the Cayman context, in the Cayman Islands, above our parliament?
No. The governor is not above the parliament by any means. What the governor is in a position. The system of passing acts of parliament in the jurisdiction is a very complex system.
Yeah,
it's not a simple one.
Right.
By any means, shape, or form. The legislation passed by parliament has to receive, before they become acts, the assent. And the assent may be withheld, may be refused, or may be sent to London to Her Majesty's pleasure until the Secretary of State decides that it can be done, or he may decide that it never can be done. So it's a complex system. So the governor is part of the legislative process by the powers the Constitution grant the governor to give assent or not, in the same way that the President of the United States is part of the legislative process in which the Constitution gives the President the veto power over the legislation passed by the U.S. Congress. But in the case of Section 81, which is your question, is that putting the governor above? No, it's a co-legislator with the Parliament. And it has very limited powers to step in and to do so even contrary to the wishes of Parliament, which is the example of the Civil Partnership Act. And that is the case, I would say, particularly as the Court of Appeal says, in circumstances, not necessarily only, but in circumstances specifically, where the United Kingdom is in breach of international obligations.
Right. So with that, as I listen,
we have a caller, right?
Yeah.
I'm so cognizant that I don't want to lose the caller,
right.
But I'm just cognizant we don't want to lose the caller.
Let's not lose the caller. How is that, Mr. Paul? On the line, let's go to the phones. Hey, Kathy is hosting. I'm listening.
I know.
Dr.
I
Raz.
your flow there, Dwayne.
Well, no. I'm just learning. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon, Dwayne, Kathy, and Dr. Raznovich.
Good afternoon.
I think I should take in Kathy on board with me because she didn't want to lose me. So
now that I know who's calling,
she changed her mind.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion, important discussion, especially in the context of the case that took place. My interest in the matter is, of course, not from the social aspect of it, the civil partnership or whether it's good or bad and so on. I'm less interested in that and more interested in the constitutional aspect and the law and order aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But just as a preliminary point, Dwayne, you've spoken about how our parliament in Cayman is not a parliament. This is a very interesting question because, as you remember, it was the members of parliament, members of the Legislative Assembly then, who said, well, look, when we go for international meetings and we tell them we are members of the Legislative Assembly, they don't know what that is. So you have to call us members of parliament. Now, every time that point arises, what I try to point out is that in other legislative bodies, like the provincial parliaments, in the provincial legislatures in Canada, in Australia, some of them still use the term either Legislative Assembly or Legislative Council.
Mm-hmm.
And they never had a problem of saying, well, unless you call us a parliament, there's a problem. And the reason that they don't really raise that issue is because, in a sense, they are ready to accept that the Canadian Parliament is the Parliament because it is a Parliament of an independent country, although we do recognize the connection with the UK. And in a sense, also, a Parliament in Cayman is more like a provincial Parliament. So it should never have been a problem to continue calling it really a Legislative Assembly. What has happened now is that there is some confusion, and the confusion is because Parliament, in its original conception, was that Parliament is supreme. Mm-hmm. Only a legislative body that is supreme, one which can make any law on anything and cannot be challenged, by another body, was Parliament, and that's the original conception of Parliament in the UK. And I just think that Cayman, okay, it has been changed, but I think it is leading to a confusion into some people thinking that, there is any supremacy in it. There's no supremacy in it at all. I just thought that should be clear. Now, more importantly, there's this issue about Section 23, and I think you've touched on it. Section 23 of the Constitution, that is the one which says that when a Parliament finds that a law is incompatible with the Constitution, all it can do is make a declaration of non-compliance. Now, Dr. Raznovich is quite correct when he points out that this is a very rare kind of approach. In most constitutions, what you find, not just in the Caribbean and in the Americas, which he pointed out, but also elsewhere. I come from Africa. A lot of constitutions in Africa declare that if a law is contrary to the Constitution, it is null and void and of no effect to the extent of the inconsistency. So that a court, even one single judge, can actually declare that it is unconstitutional and actually strike it off the statute book. I have an example from my own country where a judge struck off a matter off the statute book, said this is unconstitutional. Government didn't appeal it, and therefore it became of authority, and that was struck off. But I'll tell you what can be said in favor of the Cayman Constitution. The problem is that where you've got one single judge who can declare a matter to be unconstitutional, it's a very huge power. So that what other countries have done, they have said, look, yes, a court should be able to declare an act null and void and strike it down. However, we will give the power only to the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court normally is a court of 5 or 7 or even 9 judges. So what can be said about the Cayman one is that I think they tried to be very careful about it because there is no Constitutional Court. If there is a Constitutional Court, to which either things will go directly or can be appealed to. I think I would feel much more comfortable if that power was with them. Now, the next point really, stop me if you think I'm going on.
I just wanted for clarity though, what is it in the UK context? I mean, we talked about other jurisdictions, but in the UK, can the highest court in the UK, what can that do relative to its unwritten constitution and the laws passed by its parliament?
Well, the UK, the only limit there is, well, you see, this goes back to, I think what Dr. Raznovich was talking about the European Court of Human Rights, okay? If the European Court of Human Rights finds that the UK is in violation of a convention right, it can declare so, and it can declare that even if the law was passed by the parliament in the UK. It can say, yes, the UK parliament has passed this, but since you are members of the convention, you have violated the convention, therefore, as a European court, we can declare that, you know, your act is null and void. Now, that never used to be the case before they joined the European Union and also the convention, before they joined the convention. Before then, Parliament in the UK was supreme in every sense of the word. If they passed a law and anybody didn't like it, there's nobody to which you would go and no document to which you would go to say, well, you violated this. So that's where the difference is. And in the UK, now talking about that, I think this is where Cayman needs to act and ask for exceptions. What is happening is every few years, something new arises in the UK. Okay, at one time it was homosexual acts. Later on it was gay marriage. Another time it was the death penalty and so on and so forth. And the question that I keep asking is, for how long is it going to be? Because it's starting to look as if Cayman wants to have its cake and eat it. If Cayman wants to continue to be an overseas territory, then it seems to me that implicitly it is accepting certain things that come with that, like in terms of the obligations of the UK. Okay, that's one. But even with that, I would say that in Cayman, there should be a greater attempt by the government to get exceptions from some of these obligations. They can argue that the modalities of application of these matters must depend on the culture also of the particular country. We don't have enough time for me to give you examples of jurisdictions which have done that. I think rather than always the government saying, "Oh, we can't do this because the UK won't allow it. We can't do this because the UK won't allow it," we should say, "Okay, we understand the general obligation, but there are certain cultural things in the Cayman Islands why we can't do them." But let me close on this. You've given me so much time. Let me close on this. I was disappointed with the comments of the Court of Appeal, because the Court of Appeal seemed to suggest that there was something improper in Katina Anglin bringing this matter to court. I think that it was good that the money was spent by the government to take it to court. I think the people who opposed it were also right. Dr. Raznovich and the lawyers they engaged, they were also right to go there to participate in that, so that in the end there can be proper determination of issues. And I think the Court of Appeal was wrong in any way to make these comments like, well, why was government money spent on this? 100 couples were left uncertain and so on. Uncertainty is part of litigation, but it's just good that now at least the legalities have been specified. But I thank you very much for your time. I used to teach this subject, so when I start talking, I never know when to stop. So
thank you, sir.
Stop there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
He brought up a really good point, and that's something that I was wondering, in doing my notes last night and everything, is what cases are considered to be publicly funded. So how was that decided? So I had that question.
Just the other thing I would say is it was very interesting, the intervention of the person. I really enjoy listening to him. But what I would like to say is that I did not read the judgment in a way in which the Court of Appeal was contrary to Katina Anglin's case intervention. I think that what the Court of Appeal says is that the case, not her decision to to bring it, but the case itself was bound to fail, and question the use of public funds, because let's remember that the Legal Aid Office rejects Katina Angle's application for funds twice, and the Grand Court twice quashed that rejection and allowed Katina to have access to public funds. So the Legal Aid Office actually did read in her submissions that there was no merit. Hence, they were not prepared to provide her with money. And the court, in both instances, agreed that the case was without merit. This is more particularly important, I would say, in relation to the Court of Appeal, because when Katina Angles applied against for funds to go to the appeal level, already you have a decision of the Grand Court, a very strong decision of Justice Williams. And it's difficult to understand why the Grand Court will actually, quash the decision of the Legal Aid Office in circumstances where you have already a judgment, you have your day in court. If you want to pursue this further, do not rely on public funds. Go and make some fundraising and continue with the case on your own.
I understand she did have to pay a little bit towards.
She did have.
So
it's true, she did, but nonetheless, she relied on public funds. And I guess the consequence of that is that she managed to, as a litigant, she managed to shield herself from any cost, which, is meritorious on her and her lawyers. But I would say that the court, and I think the message of the Court of Appeal was not so much about any citizen in any country had the right to bring a claim to the court. It was not so much that criticism to her; it was more a criticism to the system that allowed this matter to go all the way to the Court of Appeal. I guess what the Court of Appeal is saying, this should not be here in front of us.
Okay,
this should have been not given permission in the first place. Public funds should not have been used. It is a message to the courts, to the inferior courts, who actually have been first gave permission and then quash Legal Aid Office decisions saying, we're not giving you money. If you want to go and do this, do it on your own, out of your own pocket. But then the Grand Court not only gave permission, but then also on top of that, gave the money for her to be able to pursue this. And I think this is the message of the Court of Appeal. I don't think it's against her. I think the Court of Appeal respect her. Personally, that's my reading of the judgment.
We've got to go to our 2 p.m. news headlines right now, and then we are going to return. We're going to keep you a few more minutes longer, Leo. If you have another appointment, you got to let them know you're going to be late. Let's go to our 2 p.m. news headlines.
They say variety is the spice of life, and that's why at Subway, we're introducing the new Boneless Hot Sub.
Say what?
The premium sub brings new ingredients like spicy breaded boneless chicken, French's crispy fried onions, and buffalo wing sauce, bringing a zesty and flavorful experience with every bite. Add some of your favorite veggies, cheese, and ranch sauce of your choice of freshly baked bread for the ultimate boneless hot sub. For a little spice in your life, try the new boneless hot sub from Subway.
So good and tasty.
And make it a meal with a drink and chips or cookies. Subway. Eat fresh.
You know, as a little girl, I dreamt of traveling to faraway places and foreign lands. I tell you what though, no more dreaming. This summer, I'm going flying with Cayman Airways. How blessed are we in the Cayman Islands to have a very own national airline? Girl, you can fly to so many international destinations without the hassle of connecting flights. On top of Jamaica, Cuba, and Honduras, you got non-stop flights from Cayman to New York, Miami, Tampa, and even Denver, Los Angeles, and now Panama. Going to be a little cafe con leche and Hollywood Squares for this old gal this summer.
Make your travel dreams come true with Cayman Airways, offering non-stop flights for non-stop adventures in Panama, LA, and many more places in between. For details and to book, call 949-2311, contact a travel agent, or visit CaymanAirways.com.
Freedom, Cayman Brac. Freedom, Little Cayman. Soft breezes, blue waters, no traffic. Unwind and rejuvenate your mind, body, and soul. Sister Island Staycations, a taste of freedom. Discover all that our sister islands have to offer.
The STEPS 2023 National Health Survey is now in full swing, and the Ministry of Health and Wellness would like to thank the community for their ongoing support of this endeavor. Participants who have completed Steps 1 and 2 of the survey are reminded to complete Step 3 by Sunday, July the 31st. Any survey participant needing additional support or information can contact nhwsteps@gov.ky or call 936-4969.
Take some advice from your Aunt Angie. If you want to go scuba diving on your vacation, don't bedazzle your wetsuit. You think you look great, but what you don't realize is that you look like a shiny, scaly fish. And it won't take long for a shark to notice you. Next thing you know, you're busting out every karate move you got. But if you're smart, you'll have CG medical insurance and get airlifted out to the closest hospital.
Get coverage for emergency evacuations. CG Britgay. Good like that. All benefits are subject to policy provisions, including eligibility at the time of service.
You are listening to Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman. Your voice, your choice. Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. To facilitate staff training, the Needs Assessment Unit office in Georgetown will be closed on Monday, July 17th, Thursday, July 20th, and Monday, July 24th. There will also be no district day on July 21st as previously scheduled for East End and North Side. In international news, North Korea has fired a suspected intercontinental ballistic missile, Japanese and South Korean officials report. The long-range missile flew more than an hour before landing short of Japanese waters on Wednesday morning. Pyongyang's launch comes after it threatened retaliation against what it said were recent U.S. spy plane incursions over its territory. Earlier this week, it threatened to shoot down such planes. Washington has dismissed the accusations, saying its military patrols are in line with international law. Security concerns have ramped up on the peninsula this year after North Korea tested new weapons. The country also conducted a record number of missile launches in 2022, including ones capable of reaching U.S. territory. Succession, The Last of Us, and The White Lotus lead the nominations for this year's Emmy TV Awards. Sarah Snook, Bella Ramsey, Jenna Ortega, and Jennifer Coolidge are among the stars up for acting prizes. Ted Lasso, The Bear, Abbott Elementary, and Wednesday are among the contenders in the comedy categories. But there is significant doubt over whether the ceremony will go ahead as planned on September 18th due to ongoing strike action in Hollywood. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman. Your voice, your choice.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
You know you've dreamed of that Mercedes, the smooth leather, the style, luxury that feels so good. Ooh la la. With the prestigious 2023 Mercedes-Benz GLA 200 up for grabs in this year's Lions Club of Grand Cayman Benzorama fundraiser. This is your chance to make that dream come true. Tickets are $25 for one, 3 for $65, or 5 for $100. Benzorama fundraiser tickets are available with Lions Club members and various sales outlets. The Lions Club of Grand Cayman Benzorama fundraiser supports numerous community initiatives, includes sightseeing, Christmas deliveries, restoration, and social services.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back. And Kathy, thank you not just for allowing me to sit in, but for you reaching out to Dr. Raz and facilitating this discussion, and to you, Professor, for helping us to talk about things that should go beyond the classroom or the courtrooms or the parliaments and the like. So, thanks, Kathy.
It's so important to help us understand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, it's absolutely putting in layman terms for me to understand because I don't understand how a lot of this goes. So, it's been a very interesting I guess, procedure for me to figure out what's really going on with these cases and, what does this really mean? Like, what does this ruling really clarify? But you did go over that already. How important this ruling was for the Cayman Islands and for people who are engaged in civil partnerships.
Not civil service.
Yeah, not civil service. Civil partnerships. It's just, it's because you're a civil servant, so I'm so used to saying that, right? More so. I got a couple questions. So when we're looking to our neighbors, now I'm going to look to our neighbors in the U.S., Dwayne, but when we're looking at them and we're seeing rights being taken away that in my lifetime I never thought I would see these rights being taken away, is that something that could happen with us with the Civil Partnerships Act?
Well,
could there be changes in the Constitution that would...
Well, that's always possible. You can always change the Constitution and to do it in a nasty way. That will have probably interesting consequences, to put it mildly, for the jurisdiction, because we live in a system where non-discrimination, equality are part of the international order. I mean, a country is not necessarily any longer welcome in the international order as we know it today without endorsing at the very basic level those important principles. And so anything that tries to erode through that, to take away from that, just to, particularly to attack, to make vulnerable a very small minority, which is normally defranchised from the political system, will not be seen as a right way to do for any independent nation. In this continent, we have the Inter-American Human Rights System, which is very strong in this regard. In Europe, you have the European Court of Human Rights, which is, again, very strong in enforcing the concept of non-discrimination and equality. So in the United States, it's a very awkward situation what is happening now. It's all in the making. I have to say that, I study law in the United States, and it's difficult for me. I will be totally honest. I never thought when I studied law in the United States that I will be alive to see decisions such as the decision that recently the court has issued in the U.S. in the last 24 months.
The Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court.
Roe versus Wade?
Yeah. But the more recent about positive discrimination as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I guess for the listener, the U.S. Supreme Court has been very active in expanding the Constitution, in providing rights to racial minorities that have been enslaved and segregated for centuries, and the same with LGBT people. And I think if one looks at those decisions of the court, you'll see that the court, similar to what happened in the 1930s with the Roosevelt New Deal, right? What happened then? The court little by little start building in case law precedent, and from those constructions expanding, just making the size of the shoe a little bigger for everyone to fit inside that shoe, right? A little bigger, and it was expanding. What this court is doing, and that is part of the role of a constitutional court. This gentleman before spoke about constitutional court. The American court is a Supreme Court, but also a constitutional court because it's the final guardian of the Constitution. That is not in the Constitution of the U.S., by the way. That is a decision of the Supreme Court from 1801. Mary versus Madison. They say we are the final guardian of the Constitution, but the important to see with the last 2 years' cases is that the court did not do what it normally did in the past, which is to open that shoe a little bit wider and bigger for a bigger feet to fit in. It literally cut the shoe and said, I don't like this shoe anymore, and throw it away. And that is judicial activism, from my perspective. Because the role of a court to keep the Constitution alive, to keep it up to date with the way in which the human rights, the basic rights are going, is part of the role of any Supreme Court anywhere in the world, or constitutional court. But what the court mustn't do is to get involved in the ideological discussion. No, I don't like this. I side with those who don't like this, and I throw this case away. And I think this is what this court is doing. This court is not building upon precedent. They're just basically saying those decisions were wrong. I think this is now the right approach to these constitutional matters. That is politics with little p. And I think that is, my view, the fatal flaw of this court. These decisions are going to be reversed. When when a normal court goes back in the United States, and that will happen eventually. It might take 50 years. It might take 100 years. I don't know. But these decisions that were passed in the last two years, I'm confident that they will be reversed by other courts.
But isn't it, as Kathy goes into the next question, Dr. Wright, isn't that sort of the chief reason why we want a supreme parliament, a body elected by its voters to pass laws reflective of the majority in society, as opposed to an appointed, nominated body, court or otherwise, constitutional or otherwise?
That is a very important discussion in constitutional philosophy, if you want. Who is the final guardian of the system?
Right.
I deeply believe in democracy, and I totally believe in the right of parliaments to legislate within the constitutional parameters. But if you have a constitution, you need someone to determine whether the parliament has actually crossed a red line or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the important thing here, because from the constitution, from the text of the constitution perspective, is the constitution has two parts. One is the Bill of Rights, and the other is the organic part, basically the one that determines who is the executive, who is the legislature, and who is the judiciary. You need someone to make sure that there is no conflict between those three powers, and you need someone to make sure that the Bill of Rights has been actually respected.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason for that is historical. Because when you don't have a strong judiciary capable of enforcing, particularly the Bill of Rights, then you may run the risk at one point in your life as a society to become South Africa with the apartheid,
but
to become Germany with the final solution. Remember, those were actually legislation passed by local parliaments with a majority that vote them in power. They were not revolutionary people. They were not, coup d'etat. They were not Fidel Castro that one day got up and said, well, let's have a revolution here. Hitler was elected into power. So the system that we have achieved over the last 50, 60 years give us that balancing where parliament has the right to legislate.
Right. But even so, despite the elected by the presumably democracy, but a judiciary, a Supreme Court, let's say, same age, ethnicity, economic background, education, a bunch of old white men, for argument's sake, playing in the same country club, they may have the same views, values, and opinions. Their morals and norms may be reflective and representative of them. How does that translate into a democracy where you have a parliament of 500 people that may represent the 300 million in the society with all its flavors, shades, colors, and faces?
I agree that the judiciary needs to be representative of the judiciary in which they live, and I think the Chief Justice, Anthony Smellie, perhaps, is the best example of someone for a quarter of a century sat in the Grand Court in this country and felt that when he heard the case of Chantal Day and her partner, the Constitution should be built in this society to include her right to same-sex marriage. I mean, his decision, regardless of which side of the discussion one can be, from the constitutional perspective, has not been upset by the Court of Appeal or the Privy Council. None of those courts address his constitutional arguments in his 175 pages of decision. And that is very meritorious of the Chief Justice Smellie. And one more thing about Chief Justice Smellie I would like to say, and I hope that I'm not breaching any privacy here, but it's a responsibility if I do. I know that he, talking about the immediacy of someone judging and the people for whom he or she deliver judgments. I understand he and his wife were shopping a I can't remember where, and came across Chantal, and he recognized her, who was walking with her partner and their daughter. And they exchanged pleasantries, as you do. And he said, "Is this your daughter?" And Chantal said, "Yes, it is my daughter." And he kneeled down, said hello to the little daughter, and walk away. And I think at that point, a human being, right, who had been involved in such a fundamental case, probably realized that he had made justice. Probably he realized.
Mm.
And this is the immediacy with which I think is important. I think this is one of the major criticisms that we have of our Privy Council, is that, they're just judges who probably have never put a foot in this jurisdiction and will never do that. They don't know what the situation here is. Lord Bingham, in a decision for Trinidad and Tobago, said something very important in relation to give force to what you have just said. In 2007, he said, in a dissenting position, the majority was going against, was reversing the Court of Appeal in Trinidad and Tobago on a point of constitutional law. He said, how could we be in a position so arrogant to reverse what the local judges at the Court of Appeal, at the Grand Court, have said and done? We have to have very powerful legal reasons to do that. And I cannot see what those powerful legal reasons are in the mind of the majority of this case.
But this is where Bingham was championing the rule of law, right?
Well, exactly. Absolutely. And so I think what you're raising is a very important point in any society. Those judges need to be able to go to the shopping mall, walk around, come across the people for whom they have done right or not, and be able to confront the consequences. And I feel like at that point, probably in that little small encounter, the Chief Justice realized the effect of his.
But so too are our parliamentarians, right? They have the immediacy as well. Ms. Cathy.
Does Cayman need to do more legislative work to be compatible with the European Convention of Human Rights?
I think the Constitution, I mean, this is an interesting debate that I would have. I think there is very important here to bring about legislation to prohibit discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. In general...
On grounds, can you say that?
Of sexual orientation, on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity.
Okay.
I think that there may be exemptions, that's fine. There are religious organizations that in hiring people for religious purposes may actually take into consideration, a specific thing that may actually lead to discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. And that is within the accepted international order. But in general, there's no reason why, if you want to be a receptionist, say, be this in a church or be in a law firm or be in an accountancy firm, your sexual orientation is relevant.
Right, exactly.
And I think the possibility that, today you can be fired if it's found out that, you're the receptionist and you're, an LGBT member, then I think that needs to be legislated. And that will put this country, I think this country, the Cayman Islands, is probably one of the most advanced jurisdictions in the Caribbean at the moment in terms of legislation that protects LGBTI people, particularly after the decision of the Court of Appeal on Tuesday.
But there's still steps to take.
But still there is a step. But listen, when you look around in the world, no country is perfect.
Right, of course.
So let's also give compliment where the compliments are deserved. And I think the country, one way or another, is moving in the right direction. I only wish, and I guess probably many people will share this, that this would have been by decision of the local parliament.
Okay.
Because it would have shown maturity. It would have been the seal to show that this jurisdiction is in a position to accept that the international order, the rule of law, is prevalent in the jurisdiction. There is an important point, I think I mentioned already, the Attorney General, in his speech, the one I mentioned before, he did actually make make emphasis on the importance of respecting the rule of law for the success of the jurisdiction. Right? The private sector, the financial sector, do not come to the Cayman Islands just because there are a nice 7-mile beach. They come to the Cayman Islands because it can see that it has a strong judiciary, independent, fair, with strong decisions, and a jurisdiction that actually accepts the rule of law, whichever the outcome is. Sadly, this was a negative step in the right direction in which we were going. You cannot decide to respect the rule of law and things that you like, and just basically to only enforce it in things that give you money. Right. If you respect the rule of law, you respect the rule of law, and you behave in that way. And I think, well, there was a mistake. Hopefully that will not happen again. And we're going to be moving towards a stronger country with everybody living in accordance to our basic constitution and in accordance with this concept of rule of law.
Okay, what about the next steps for Colors Caribbean?
Colors Caribbean is not happy with the status quo. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. We don't think that to live in a system of perpetual segregation, which is what it is to have access to the civil partnership legal framework. So we have all the rights, but we're not entitled to use the name.
Do we have all the rights?
We have all the rights.
All the rights.
We have all the rights.
Married people have.
Yeah, married people have. So, but we feel that that's segregation, whichever way you want to see it. And one of the definitions you use to differentiate marriage from civil partnership, you use the religious connotation of marriage. But you have civil marriage in the Cayman Islands.
That's on the General Registry site.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you can marry there. And what Chantal and Vicky wanted to do is to use the civil register to register their marriage as a couple. They didn't want to force a church to marry them. And so we actually are been fighting very, very ferociously against the UK for Section 14. We feel that the way in which Section 14 has been construed by the Privy Council, basically the Privy Council said very clearly that even if the European Court were to change its interpretation of Article 12, which is the one about marriage, Section 14 is a bedrock that prevents marriage to be open to same-sex couple under the Constitution in the Cayman Islands. And we think that this is segregation. I mean, there's no difference, as the Chief Justice Melly said in his judgment, between the prohibition of interracial marriage vis-a-vis the prohibition of same-sex marriage. So, there cannot be justification. So Colors Caribbean challenged the legality of the Constitution in the High Court in London, which is the only court with jurisdiction to look into the legality of a constitution for an overseas territory. But we were refused permission to go ahead. So at the moment we are looking at the possibility of challenging the constitution of the Cayman Islands in the European Court of Human Rights. Just to give you the premiere here, the appellants in Bermuda that lost in the Privy Council, they won in the first instance in the Court of Appeal, but the Privy Council reversed them. They have successfully been admitted in Strasbourg in the European Court. They're challenging the decision on same-sex marriage of the Privy Council. The United Kingdom has been communicated of the case. The UK has now the opportunity to settle with them, which basically will have to, I think I would have thought that the only option for the UK, if they want to settle, would be to bring same-sex marriage in Bermuda. Or then there will be a hearing, probably in a couple of years' time, in Strasbourg, and there will be an assessment by the European Court of Human Rights as to whether the decision of the Privy Council breached the European Convention or not. The applicants in Bermuda are not challenging Article 12 interpretation by the European Court. What they're challenging is the fact that they did have the right to same-sex marriage, and that was taken away. Going back to the point you actually raised, the court's actually taking away rights they haven't acquired. And that has to be in breach of Article 12 because it's discriminatory plus Article 14. So their case has been admitted preliminary and is now a matter of, I mean, I would be very surprised if the UK were to settle, particularly the current government of the UK. And if there were another government, maybe, but this government is unlikely to settle given the policies they have against LGBTI people. And so probably going to have a hearing in Strasbourg in a couple of years and a decision within 4 or 5 years.
So, that leads me to the marriage law in the Cayman Islands states that a union between a man and a woman as husband and wife. That's what marriage is. Husband and wife. Now, I think it was 2004 or so when civil partnerships were introduced in the UK. But about 10 years after that, same-sex marriage was made legal. So about a decade after. Do you see that happening for Cayman at all? Because that would include changing the marriage law, right? To say
only the marriage law. Yeah, you don't need to change the constitution. I think I wouldn't be surprised. I think people in the jurisdiction are more supportive, are more open, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if younger generations in 20 years time, 15 years time, are faced with the conundrum. They might actually decide to go ahead with it.
They might shake some things up. Any final questions from you, Dwayne?
No final, but just an invitation to rejoin us another time to look at, as Kathy so able to set up the potential impact on future laws, perhaps even amendments to current legislation, to potential impact of what, if any, this precedent may have relative to certain things. So maybe we'll have a discussion again. Certainly has been very instructive. I felt like a student again,
I definitely did.
So, Dr. Erasmus, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
What about you? Is there any final thoughts from you?
I wish that the matter as it currently stands, is allowed to stand without any more appeals to the Privy Council.
Can this still be appealed?
Yeah.
It can be appealed again.
Eileen can still appeal. She probably will require funds again. I truly hope that the Grand Court, if he has to review a refusal from the Legal Aid Office, thinks twice, carefully, particularly after the Court of Appeal decision. I think it is very cruel to keep people's life in a limbo.
Right.
And it will be another 4 or 5 years for a case that, again, is not meritorious. Not because I say it. You have already 2 courts. A unanimous Court of Appeal who have said the same. It should not have happened. It was allowed to happen, and the fact that it was allowed to happen is questionable. Why did it happen? But it is what it is. We are here now, and I hope that we just pack this and let people live their life quietly and just enjoy what they are.
Thank you so much for joining us. And Billy, if you're listening, I'm sorry that you didn't join us on the discussion. Actually, I know you were going to join us overseas, but I'm not sure what happened. So thank you anyways, Leo, for coming and joining us and really educating us this afternoon on Talk Today. Definitely myself, you definitely made things a lot more clear. And I think for a lot of our listeners, you did as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting this on the table. And hopefully as people listen, we understand the importance of being involved, informed, engaged with our Constitution, understand the importance of being a voter, but also an active participant, whether you're a legislator or whether you advocate otherwise, and the understanding of many of the things, whether we call on lobbyists or otherwise, that go on behind the scenes, the international implications of decisions on the domestic legislation, the importance of the office holders as well as, the participants and spectators. We can't be an innocent bystander anymore. We have to be an active participant. So, there.
That was a wrap up. I have nothing to say on that.
I appreciate it.
Perfect.
My parents instructed me to be a thinker and one who talks from an informed perspective. So tomorrow, please come back for a Talk Today. I'll work on my singing. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned until then. Be blessed.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. And Cayman Airways. Call them on 949-2311 to book your nonstop flights to Los Angeles and Panama. And Digicel, Cayman's bigger, better network.
It's a 24-karat summer with Digicel. In honor of our first truly COVID-free summer, Digicel is giving away $24,000. Be one of 10 to win $2,400 this July. For a chance to win, all you have to do is switch to Digicel, activate a Prime bundle, or simply pay your bill on time. It's that easy. It takes 2 minutes to get $2,400 richer. Make the choice to win today and visit a Digicel store near you.
South Coast Bar and Grill up in Breakers, man, that is the place. For traditional Cayman cuisine, oh, you will love the taste. At South Coast Bar and Grill, we got conch and lobster and turtle stew. And every Sunday, come out with your family for the barbecue.
South Coast Bar and Grill by the seaside, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, lunch and dinner. Call us at 947-2517.
For Cayman and cuisine, the talk today is South Coast Bar and Grill.
At Doctors Hospital, we know life happens, and usually when you least expect it. So when unexpected medical issues arise, you need quality care close to home. Located in the heart of Georgetown, our accomplished team of physicians and medical staff treat minor urgent conditions such as migraines, chest and abdominal pain, shortness of breath, burns, broken bones, open wounds, and more. 24 hours, 7 days a week with no appointment necessary. Peace of mind is important when life happens. At Doctors Hospital, we're always here just for you. Need to speak to someone? Call 949-6066.
The offices of dermatologist Dr. Wayne Porter will be taking appointments from July 9th through 15th at his Crew Road Clinic. Appointment slots are limited. Whether you're seeking advanced skincare, Botox, filler, cosmetic skin enhancements, or simply looking to reduce wrinkles, Dr. Porter offers a full-service dermatology and dermatological surgery practice. For more information, email dr.porterkiman@gmail.com or call 946-9020 to book your appointment today. That is 946-9020.
From boat days to beach gatherings, leave the catering to Subway. Choose from small and large sandwich platters, double meat wrap platters, and top it off with optional cookie platters for dessert. Or ask about our Subway box to go with the option of 6-inch or foot-long sandwich, 1 cookie, and 1 bag of chips. For all occasions and celebrations, let Subway focus on the food so you can focus on the fun. Visit subway.ky for catering options. Subway. Eat fresh.